Hello and welcome back. In the previous lectures, we have learned that we can record our expenses in QuickBooks Online by recording them as expense or bill. And we have also seen that when we are recording an expense, the information that we enter is the supplier name, the payment account, the date, the category, and the amount. So later on when we look at our financial reports, we can look the numbers, the expenses by supplier, by payment method, by category and by date. And we have also learned that we can add additional tracking categories. For example, that can be location, that can be class, that can be tags, and that can be any custom field that you want. Now in this section we will talk about another tracking that we usually need, and that is tracking of expenses by customer. So sometimes we are incurring our expenses for specific customers and we would like to track those expenses to those customers for our decision making. Sometimes we also need to bill these expenses to the customers. So these are two separate things. First of all, maybe you just need the tracking at the customer level for your own decision making. And secondly, in addition to that, you may also need to bill the customers for those expenses. So QuickBooks Online offers you a very simple way of doing that by giving you the tracking by customer option. You will not be using any of the fields that you have used for the tracking of location or class or tags, not like that. The existing customers that you have in your QuickBooks Online that you enter when you record your sales can be somehow brought here on the expenses form and can be used to track the expenses to customers. Now how we will do that? Let us start setting this up first. First of all, you will go to the settings option here, go to company settings, and then here let us go to the expenses tab, and then in these settings you need to turn them on. So first of all click on edit and you can see this option, track expenses and items by customer. Turn this on, and in addition to that you can see make expenses and items billable. So we will come to this in the second step after this lecture. First, let us just take a look at track expenses and items by customer. So just turn it on and then scroll down, click on save, and then click on done. Let us first of all refresh our screen, and simple refresh will not work. We will have to do Ctrl F5 so that any cookies are also cleaned and we can actually get the fresh form. And now let us press on the new button and click on expense, and you can see you now have this additional field here where you are able to select the customer name by clicking on this drop down, and by this you will be able to track your expenses at the customer level as well. Let us do a complete example in the next lecture. Now let us record our first expense that we would like to trace to a customer. So first of all, let us enter the payee name. I would say this is Amazon. The payment account used in my case is cash on hand. And then let us choose the correct date. I would say this is 1st of December 2025. And then choose the category. In my case, this is purchases, and you can see here in my case, I have two purchases accounts. One is related to cost of goods sold, another is related to expenses. Now, of course, if the expense is related to product or service itself, it will be classified to cost of goods sold. And if it is just an operating expense, this account will be used here. In my case, I will choose the cost of goods sold one purchases account. We can say for client job, the amount is $100, and now here we have to choose a customer. If the customer is already entered, you can select from here, or you can add a new customer from here. I would enter the customer name as Amanda Jones, and that is all the detail I need to enter, and then scroll down and click on save. and the customer has been added. Then all you got to do is to click on save and close, and this will complete recording of expense. Now this expense will be accounted for just like all the expenses that you have done earlier. But since in this case we have also entered the customer information while recording expense, we will now be able to see some of the expense reports at customer level. And most importantly, we will be able to run our profit and loss report at customer levels, which means that now we can assess the profitability by customer. Let us take a look at this report in the next lecture. So now let us take a look at the reports and let us see what amazing information can we get now in the reports. First of all, let us search for all the reports that are related to customers, and here you can see we have so many reports, but most of them are irrelevant to expenses. So for example, these time activities or estimates or income or sales are not relevant to expenses. But take a look at this one, profit and loss by customer. Now profit and loss is the report that you have seen earlier, in which we have all the income and all the expenses of business. But this time those income and expenses will be split by customer, so you would be able to assess your profitability by customer, and that is definitely an amazing thing to have. So I'll click here. First of all, let us take a look at the parameters. We are looking for the complete year to date, and we are looking at this report on the cash basis. You can see we have column for each customer in our business, and we can see our profitability by each customer. But let us notice something else. You have income for each customer, you can see here, and of course when we are recording the invoices, this income is being recorded by customer. But let us take a look at the expenses. So far you only have one expense that is related to Amanda Jones, and that is something we have recorded in the previous lecture, in which we marked the expense to customer. For the earlier expenses that we have recorded in our business, since the tracking by customer was not on and we were not marking the expenses to customers, you can see all of those expenses are coming here into the non-specified column. So if we go back and track all the expenses to the customers, you would be able to see the profitability by customers. And of course in business there are some expenses that are general and those are not related to any specific customers. Of course for them you will still be having such non-specified column, because you will not be putting any customer name while you will be recording the expense. Now let us change this accounting method to accrual, and you know that in accrual basis you will be seeing the transaction even if the cash payment and cash receipt has not been made yet. And you will notice one thing here. So other than this $100 for purchases for Amanda Jones, we have some entries, but please notice that all of these entries are in the cost of goods sold line. So let me remind you, we have just turned on the tracking by customer and we have only recorded one expense, that was for Amanda Jones. So where are these entries coming from? So basically, when we are managing the inventory and when we are recording the sales for any specific customer, the inventory is getting updated automatically in the backend. But since that is happening when we are recording the sales for customer, that entry of cost of goods sold being recorded from the inventory is also being tracked at the customer level, and system is giving this to you. So it means that even if you are not using the expense tracking by customer, you will still be having at least this level of profitability by customer in your profit and loss by customer report. With this, now we can move to the next phase of this particular area, where we will not just be tracking the expenses on customers, but we will also be billing the expenses, the same expenses, to the customers, sometimes with profit and sometimes without charging a profit. And of course QuickBooks make it super easy for us by adding some features into the system. Let me show that to you in the next lecture. Now let us talk about the second part, and that is charging the expenses to the customers and billing it to them. Now that billing can be at profit at additional markup, or that can be just at cost for the reimbursement. But in either case, we have to follow the same process to begin with. First of all, we have to turn that on in the settings. So I will navigate to settings and click on company settings. Here we need to go to the expenses tab, and first of all let us click on edit. Now here you will find this option, make expenses and items billable. First of all turn that on, and now here you will find some additional options. First of all, system is asking you that would you be charging a markup on your expenses. Well, the answer can be yes or no, but don't worry about that. Just follow the generic rule here that you will mostly be charging the profit, so I will select this. If in case there is something where we do not need to charge the markup, we can then exclude that specifically when we are charging the expense to the customer. We will not have to handle that in the settings part. Secondly, track billable expenses and items as income. Now this question is important. When you are charging your expenses to customers, will that become your income, or will that be just expense reimbursement in your P&L? Let me repeat that. Will that be added to the income lines in your profit and loss statement, or will that simply go to the same expense account where original expense was going and that was netting off? Well, both of these cases are possible, but you have to decide it carefully that how would you like to treat it. Let me give you a generic rule. If you are charging a markup on the expenses to the customer, this is going to be income. So we will say that this should be treated as income. And in case you are just going to reimburse your expenses, there is not going to be any profit involved over that. This is going to be treated as cost, reimbursement of cost, and not as income. Now this is something we have to decide carefully. And after this, there is another question, and that is, will that income be going into the single account? All the income should be going in a single account, or will there be multiple accounts? Now let me explain you. Let us say we are charging some traveling expenses to the customers and some other stationery expenses to the customers and some purchases to the customers. Do you want all of these three lines to be separately appearing in your profit and loss statement as billable expenses for purchases, billable expenses for traveling, billable expenses for stationery, and so on? Do you want that to happen, all the separate lines? If that is the case, you will select multiple accounts. But if you just want all of those expenses to be compiled in one single line as billable expenses recovered income, that is going to be this one in a single account. And finally, will you be charging the sales tax to the customer? Now, if we have paid the sales tax when we are incurring those expenses, of course, we got to charge that to our customer as well. So if you are sales tax registered, you would most probably be clicking on this and turning it on. With this, let us scroll down and save our changes and click on done.